Hello everyone, welcome to my new YouTube channel, The Chemoport Girl. What is this all about? Well, this is the story of my cancer journey from diagnosis until, well, today. And so I am going to be talking about that journey. This is not medical advice. I'm not here to diagnose anyone. I'm just here to talk about the woulda, shoulda, couldas that I wish I would have done and what I learned along the way. I do have a link for Linktree that will get you some really good resources, some really good sites, as well as I am an Amazon affiliate. So there are some items that I would strongly recommend you purchase either for yourself if you're undergoing cancer or a loved one. So let's get this party started. All right, so going back quite a few years, in 2017, I decided to go get a baseline mammogram. And I'd heard all the horror stories about how it hurts and on your toes and they flatten your breast. And, it's a really uncomfortable situation. But my aunt was going through a double mastectomy and she was in her 70s and I was only in my 40s, but I still figured good time for a baseline. My grandma had died of cancer. My great aunt had breast cancer and it recurred, and she fought it and lived to be, like 90 some years old. So it ran in the family, but it ran on dad's side. And in my naivety, I just assumed that it was passed from women's side, so my mom's side, and nobody on my mom's side had had breast cancer. So I go in, I get my mammogram, and it was really, really short. It was about 10 minutes long. Went in, put the gown on, had it open to the front, had my little breast squished down. The nurse that was running the machine told me, a woman your age, we oftentimes call you back because you have much more dense breasts with a lot of lumps in there that, sometimes we can't really distinguish. So if we call you back, don't freak out on us. So, all right. And got done with that. Nothing hurt, easy peasy. And she said, we'll let you know in a couple days. And I went home. And home for me is in rural Idaho. And so the nearest medical that can do more major things other than, treat a sore throat or whatnot is almost 2 hours away from my house. So I go home. A couple days later, they call and they said, we'd like for you to come back because we want to take another look. Well, they'd told me this, so I wasn't concerned. And this time my husband went with. And so we went all the way back. And I told my husband it didn't take very long the last time, so why don't you just run across the street to the sports store and do a little shopping while I get this done. So I go in, undress, put the gown back on, open to the front, go back to that same mammogram, and they show me this is the little spot that we're looking at, that we're concerned about. I'm like, all right. And the nurse says, well, it's perfectly round, and we never find cancer when it's that round. So if you're a nurse or a technician, don't give medical advice or don't make medical diagnoses until you know what it really is. So I get done, and they send me back to the waiting area where I changed and said, just don't change, hold on. And so I did for about 10, 15 minutes. And then they came back and said the doctor would really like to get a biopsy of that spot. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and schedule that. And they're like, no, no, he's going to do it right now. So the biopsy consisted of they kind of numbed the area a little bit, and then they inserted a needle to drop off a little metal marker so they would know exactly where that tumor is if they have to go back in. And then after that, they took another needle with like a little pinchers on the end to grab some of that tissue and pull it out. Now, mind you, this was only about 1 centimeter in size, so it's pretty darn tiny, which is a good thing. And they pulled out the biopsy material. They didn't even give me a stitch, gave me a bag of ice to put in my bra, and away I go. They did tell me, you'll hear from us in a couple days. Your doctor may also call you. So I went home, like, one and done. That's all good. And a couple days later, I get a call from my local GP, well, actually, her nurse. And her nurse said, Andrea will see you today at 3 o'clock. I turned to my husband. I said, oh, well, I have breast cancer. And he's like, you don't know that. You haven't heard yet. I said, what doctor all of a sudden has a free schedule in the middle of the afternoon on, I think this was a Monday or Tuesday? And so him and I drove into town, and I went in alone because at that point I didn't really know what he could offer. I regret that. I wish he would have gone with me. So keep that in mind because that's a theme for me. So those should haves are coming through. And Andrea told me, Michelle, you have breast cancer. And I cried. That's kind of, I think, a natural reaction for anyone to hear that they have cancer. And she said, you're a fighter and you're strong, and I guarantee you're going to beat this. And I took those words to heart that I was not going to go down without a fight. She did tell me then that she referred me to an oncologist in the town that I just driven to for the mammogram, and they'd be calling me to set up an appointment. So a few days later, I get that call and we head back, or I head back again alone. And it's not that my husband didn't want to join me, but he had a really, really infected tooth that needed to be treated immediately. And he was in agony. And I was like, I already know I have cancer. Don't worry about it. And anyhow, over the course of the past week, from when my general practitioner told me until this appointment, I had done what every red-blooded human would do that has access to the internet. I Googled the crap out of it. And by the end of the week, I essentially had my honorary degree from Google U on breast cancer. And there are a bunch of different types, but they all kind of seem like they would be addressed very similarly, where you might have a lumpectomy, they might give you some radiation, or you just might go on some medication. But, like, gosh, I think it's 6 in 10 or 8 in 10 women get breast cancer. So it's very common, and a lot of men get breast cancer. So I kind of read up on it. It kind of calmed me down. Thought, okay, this is very common, very treatable. And from what I'm reading, my little spot was only 1 centimeter in size. So I caught it at a really good time. So thanks to my aunt for kind of being my unknown motivator to get that baseline done, and got it done when I did. So a week later, or a few days later, I head back to that town to meet what I thought was my oncologist. Did not know there are numerous phases of oncology. So this was a surgical oncologist I was meeting with. I would later meet with my regular oncologist. There is a radiation oncologist, a radiology oncologist, and I'm sure there's others out there. So I didn't know any of this. And I went all the way back, hour and 45-minute drive, and sat down to meet with this new doctor. And her first question was, do you know why you're here? Which I thought was kind of a dumb question. Oh, yeah, just like hanging out at doctors' offices to see what they might have to say. And second off, and I answer, well, I have cancer. And she's like, well, do you know what type of cancer? I'm like, oh my God, I'm beginning to question this woman. And I'm like, well, I have breast cancer. And she's like, no, do you know what kind of breast cancer you have? Well, at this point, I'm like, no, because, Andrew didn't really understand what she was seeing. And so that's why she referred me over here. And she's like, well, you have triple negative breast cancer. I will tell you the first thought that popped in my mind was, woohoo, triple and negative. Oh, I got the best one then. I never really read up on that, but probably because it's just, easy peasy. And I'm like, oh, that's a good thing, right? And she just shook her head. She's like, no. She's like, this is the most aggressive form of breast cancer. It is most likely to recur. It is most likely to spread. And our best treatment option at this time is chemo, period. We'll do surgery to remove the lump, and we'll do surgery to look at the lymph nodes that are near that lump, and then you're going to have to do chemotherapy. Well, triple negative is most common in younger women. Obviously, I wasn't younger, well into my 40s, and women of color. Tell right here, I'm not a woman of color other than white and very pink, or pale and pink. And the third reason is because you could have the BRCA1 gene mutation, which is hereditary. Guess which one I had? So yes, they did a genetic test on me. I had the BRCA1 gene mutation. I talked to my aunt, did not realize, other than my great aunt having breast cancer, my grandma having breast cancer, and now my aunt having breast cancer, that there was also a third sister, another great aunt Catherine, who she ended up having ovarian cancer, which is part of this BRCA1 gene mutation, and died very young in her 30s. And both of her daughters also had ovarian cancer and died in their 30s. So we are talking, it is running rampant through my paternal vein here. And here I all along was blaming my mom. And no, that was not the situation. It was an inherited mutation called BRCA1, and that was the cause of my cancer. So now, you know what's going on. I went to that appointment by myself. Bad, bad move. Do not do that. You think you're going to be strong enough. You think you're going to catch everything they say, but you kind of shut down. And that's what happened. I didn't have a notebook with, I didn't have a friend with, and, started crying, missed probably half of what they told me. And on the drive home, I had to pull over because I was crying so much and texted a couple friends, and they sent me silly pictures of like Madonna with her cones or Elvira with her long black hair. And it is definitely the medicine I needed because I deal with stress and sadness through inappropriate humor and sarcasm. So shout out to having good friends. And obviously I called my husband, and he had asked me, do you want to go back to work? And I said, no, I have the week off. Let's just enjoy it. I don't know how many, I don't know what is going to happen next. And this is my time off. It's fall, it's beautiful. And so I kept my leave intact, and glad I did. Because after that, I burned a lot of leave for not so much fun stuff. So, uh, other piece of advice, though you really can't control when you're going to get diagnosed with cancer, October is kind of the worst month because it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and everything is in your face breast cancer. And for a long time, I hated the color pink. I hated looking at billboards, watching football games because they'd be wearing pink shoes and pink socks, and it was miserable. But I pulled up my big girl panties and away I went. So this next chapter that I'm going to do is going to be on my treatment. Thank you for listening in. And if you have any questions, just post them below and I will try to answer them in future videos.